So as you guys may have noticed, I haven't really been able to upload a whole lot lately, so I'm playing catch up this weekend. I'm making quite a few videos here just to get you guys that Tengu content because you need it, and especially over the holidays, you want something to do while you're sitting there trying to avoid political conversations with your family. Well, I got you, you know? But this one, I want to do a little different. So there's been a lot of tournaments that have concluded lately. Like, we've been doing weekly tournaments. The Toronto Time Capsules is what there's called. We just had a Tengu Rumble finish, and as well as even like the Collectibles Exchange tournament, stuff like that. And so there's been a lot of different topping lists that have happened throughout the Discord and, you know, IRL and everything. And instead of covering literally every top deck, I figured I would kind of isolate it down to my top 5 of what I think the most like unique or interesting builds are. That way we're not looking at like, you know, a bunch of like of the same thing over and over again. You know, you guys can let me know if you like this. Typically for bigger tournaments, I want to do like a big top cut breakdown to talk about all the different deck lists. But since, you know, everything's been kind of mild lately, I just kind of wanted to cover the spicy decks. So you guys can let me know if you want to always see the top cut coverage of everything. But again, since nothing really big has happened outside of the Collectible Exchange tournament, which that top 8 was already covered by Playtest IRL, I thought I'd maybe just kind of give my insight on what decks I think were spicy, you know? So you guys can let me know if you like that. If not, we'll just go back to doing the same thing. We'll try it for this one just for now. But yeah, so we're just going to talk about Tengu Rumble. I just put this up here so you guys could see an idea of what the meta game looked like for that tournament. You know, 5 Tengu Plant, 4 Hero Beat, 3 Agents, 3 TG Psychics, 3 Chaos, 2 Cat Sith, 1 Piper, 2 Frogs, 1 Plasma, 1 Lancer, and then a bunch of others, so a bunch of one-ofs, you know. These are tournaments where you have like 72 hours to play out your match. A lot of the lists are going to be pulled from this, and actually Toronto Time Capsules, there's some really spicy lists coming up in there, so I wanted to talk about them. So in number 5, you know, out of, you know, number 1 is going to be my favorite of these lists, but number 5, we're going to come in and we're going to take a look. So we have Splevin, who topped with a pretty unique TG build. I mean, we've seen it kind of before, but not as much recently. Where we're opting away from like skill drain and we're playing like tour guide TG. This is pretty cool because of the fact that you can do plays with like you special summon a striker, then normal tour guide, get a Sangan. If they haven't maxed you at that point, you can even like extend it a bit further and you can go for Warwolf, which means you can do like, I don't know, kind of crazy synchro plays. Like you could synchro into a Wonder Magician, pop a back row, then synchro for 8 into scrap, and then like pop the Sangan. There's a lot of cool plays that this opens up, which is why I kind of put it in my number 5 slot. Again, it's not something that is like completely unique. We've definitely seen people opt for the tour guide in TGs before, but I do kind of like it. Honestly, I was kind of thinking about giving one of these builds a try myself because it just kind of looks like a lot of fun to play with all the like different options that are available for you. So yeah, I mean, we got like some pretty common, like we got Liberty at last on the side. Interesting, we're opting for the siding into skill drain, so likely if you're going against something like Agents or something effect reliant, you could side into double skill drain and then double Barbaros, and that's pretty cool too. But yeah, I mean, nothing too crazy or fancy just yet, but I do think this list is really, really cool. So we'll move on to my number 4 pick. So coming in at number 4, we have Alucard D, who took 2nd place with this Chaos Control type deck. You know, it's basically like your standard like stun deck, and it's honestly pretty cool. I mean, you don't really get to see something like it's kind of like another version of like, hey, this is the good cards deck. We got Fossil Dyna in the main, and I'm sure setting this bad boy and like flipping it on people like definitely blows people out. Not to mention like weird synergy with like Spear Reaper, Fossil Dyna, like that can get really, really pesky, especially since we have a lot of ways to negate attacks. But overall, this is a pretty cool list. You know, I like the Breaker. I like all the different options we have for plays, but it's definitely going to revolve around like we use Thunder King and we try to bring it back with Tour Guide into Leviair, stuff like that. We're on Lance to try to protect it. Not a ton of Dark Bribes, which is interesting. I think typically the Chaos Control lists do run Dark Bribes, so your opponent can't like prevent the Thunder King from being summoned, but Yeah, definitely a really unique list. Again, taking second place in one of our like weekly tournaments is like kind of cool. So love to see it. Look at all these extra deck options. We can go into Armor Master or even Arcanite Magician, and that's kind of fun to see too. But yeah, it's a pretty creative deck. I definitely like this one a lot. Kind of looks it like looks really different from our typical stun because it has such a high monster count. Like 19 monsters is honestly a lot. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how that like works in terms of the stun, but you really, reasonably speaking, can rely on a lot of these monsters to just stall you out. Like Thunder King, if they don't out it, they're losing to it. Spirit Reaper is obviously annoying to deal with if your opponent isn't on a lot of econs and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my number 4 slot. We'll head over to number 3. All right, coming in at number 3, we have Simply Zerg on a scrap list. And the main thing I found super interesting about this scrap list is he's opting to run Scrap Searcher, which if you don't know what it does, I pulled it up on my phone here. When a scrap monster you control except Scrap Searcher is destroyed and sent to the graveyard while this card is in the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. When this card is special summoned, destroy all face-up monsters you control except scrap monsters. So it's a level 1 non-tuner, and what I think is actually kind of cool about this, and I think this is the angle they're opting for, is if you have Scrap Searcher, you know, floating around in your graveyard or whatever, and let's say your opponent like warnings the Scrap Dragon or destroys the Scrap Dragon, and then you float back a Scrap Beast, well then in that same scenario you can also float back a Scrap Searcher, so that gives you a level 5 tuner or a level 4 tuner and a level 1 non-tuner, so that opens up the ability to make Nat Beast, which is really sick, as well as it gives you insane Trish plays. Like if you normal a Tengu after that or something, like it can open up some cool stuff. So that's really sick. I also really like the Scapegoat tech in this. This is actually, it makes a lot of sense. If you're gonna be on scraps where you're just popping a bunch of stuff, an end phase Scapegoat with a Scrap Dragon on board can be so terrifying, because even if they can destroy the Scrap Dragon, if you get to bring back your Scrap Beast, like, you know, and then you can just synchro with the tokens, this also opens up Nat Beast plays. So I think this is a really creative take on scraps, like something we really haven't seen before. You know, like it's small tech cards, but I feel like these small tech cards make a huge difference in terms of the gameplay and your options during the game. So I really like this list. I think it's super fun and interesting. We're opting to side the Fiendish Chain and then go for Valor. I wonder if this is a first versus second thing, because obviously going second, the Fiendish Chain is going to be really nice, but we also don't really have any tools outside of Judgment to stop a Heavy Storm. So looking to go maybe just rely more so on your normal summons and the floating of like Tengu or Thunder King is probably what we're looking to do here. Also interesting that we have Mind Control in the side deck. That card is pretty good. I definitely would main that card. I don't know why we would side it, but yeah. Overall, this is one of the cooler scrap decks I've seen in a hot minute, so that's why I wanted to put this in my number 3 slot, and we will move on to number 2. So, number 2, we have Tegalik playing Psychics, taking first place with this list, and this is very different than my typical Psychic build, but I don't hate it. I actually think this is pretty interesting. We have the Psychic Cleric, which is the one that lets you like discard to banish, and then when it leaves the field you get to bring stuff back. We're opting for Tour Guide over Tengu. I've had some people say that this is their preference. It's not for me, but I understand the logic. It's like, it's pretty strong just in the same sense of like, hey, you get Esper Girl floating, you summon Esper Girl, and then you can just normal Tour Guide, special summon Sangan, synchro for 5, and that's like another pretty cool way to like access your like psychic monsters, especially since it looks like they are on Miracle Synchro Fusion, which is pretty cool. And they're also on one copy of Dr. Cranium, which is when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 800 life points to add one psychic type monster from your deck to your hand. It's a level 1 non-tuner. This is just another card that gets you access to your psychic package, which honestly isn't bad. Like having that generic searcher as like a set card is like pretty cool, and I mean, it just kind of sucks that it has to be destroyed by battle, but you know, getting access to either search a wizard or a witch, depending on what you need, just gives a bit more consistency. He's also on double duality, which I mean, I'm never a fan of duality in psychics just because of how many turns like on your standby phase you're going to summon something back, so like duality feels kind of stinky. you know, because you just can't activate it for a lot of those turns. Also on Psychic Overload, which is like, I don't know, this is a pretty cool card. It's basically like a Pot of Avarice, except just for Psychic, so you're just constantly cycling your stuff back. I could see the merit. You know, it feels a little contradictory with the triple wizard, but hey, this deck took first place, guys, so happy to see Psychics doing well, someone else doing well with the Psychics. I love to see it. You know, I love this archetype. It's so fun. Having all your cards float is so annoying for your opponent, and something that I experienced over the weekend when I was in California is Silent Psychic Wizard. It says banish any psychic monster in your grave and special summon it. It doesn't matter the level, so like I banished a Thought Ruler that was summoned properly with Wizard, and when the Wizard died, I went to crash it into a Thunder King so it could just summon back Thought Ruler, which is really crazy that this card does that. That's another thing I feel like a lot of people miss about this card, is they think it's just like just for the Esper Girl, but like on the Wizard, it goes pretty hard. So yeah, that's my number 2 slot. Really cool to see Psychics doing well. Super happy to see it, and we will move on to my number 1 list here in a second. So my number 1 deck for my top 5 choice is going to be the Tengu Rumble top 4 list of Himne. So it was either 3rd or 4th. But this is Heroes, except it's Jar Turtle Heroes, which is something I thought was such a cool idea, man. Like, I mean, obviously it looks like your standard hero deck, but just by throwing in these Jar Turtles and the Jar of Greeds, it just opens up so much, right? Like, if your opponent swings into the set monster, or if you find a way to like just get this on the board with like multiple Jar of Greed set, you're just gonna plus a million. And you never have to feel afraid to set these Jar of Greeds, because it can bait your opponent's Heavy Storms or like MSTs, and you're just gonna punish them. So I like the incorporation, and like the main reason why this is in here is because it's a water. So instead of the Snowman Eater for like the future fusion, you're running Jar Turtle, which has a really big booty, and then it gives you just a bunch of draws. So it adds some consistency. I would love to try this build. I think this is so clever. It's just a funny card to like try and use and work around, but I definitely want to give it a go. I think this would be a lot of fun. But I mean, other than that, it's like kind of your standard hero package, like, but like I just feel like this adds so many variables to the deck that like I would love to give a shot, right? Like, just being able to even get a single Jar of Greed to draw you 2 cards, I feel like your opponent is going to lose their minds if that happens. So yeah, this would be so much fun, especially like I just imagine the scenario, you have like 2 Jar of Greed set and your opponent swings into your Jar Turtle, it flips, and then in the battle phase you just double Jar of Greed to draw like 4 cards. It just sounds so gross. So yeah, congrats to Himne for getting top 4 with this and taking my number 1 slot. I just couldn't get over the Jar Turtle, man. I just thought this was so cool. So but yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, you guys. Like I said, let me know if you prefer to see like all the different tournament like top cuts. Normally I do that, but since they were smaller tournaments, I was like, you know, maybe we'll just talk about the ones that I think are really interesting or cool. So we'll just give a quick shout out to my Patreons. So shout out to Grant Johnson, Beast Eyes, Slap God, My Dude, Photoshooty, Brian Ford, and Sven Olbrahan. Thank you guys so much for the support. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and have a great time dueling today.